America needs a comeback. I beat a chronic drug addiction and dedicated the last 20 years of my life building the kingdom of God as a pastor and a popular conference speaker. But I watched as our nation slipped further and further away from its destiny. So I came from behind the pulpit to help reunite our country and inspire the church to get out of the four walls and get into the fight for our nation. Now, we talk to people that I've met along the way that are fighting for faith, family, and freedom. I've been fighting my whole life. Now, I'm fighting for you, and these people are fighting by my side. We need a comeback, and I'm an American comeback story. I'm Derrick Gates, and this is The Current.
Welcome, everybody, to the very first episode of The Current, right here in the beautiful Cross TV studios in California. It's such an amazing time for us to be alive in this season of fighting in our country and really trying to fight for freedoms of faith, family, and what we believe is so close to our heart. And so we just welcome you to this first episode, and it's an important episode for me, so I brought some friends along with me. But along the way, I want you to know we're going to be bringing candidates, we're going to be bringing pastors, people of faith, people of family. We're going to be bringing school board people along, so you know what's happening in our country and how you can fight better for what's important to you in your home and in your family and in your church even. So today I have with me on the first episode, I have my friend Tim. Say hi, Tim.
What's up?
Tim, take about 10 seconds, just tell them about you and where you're from.
Well, I'm born and raised in Detroit, and I relocated to Southern California in 2001. Started a church, founded a church in 2002. Been fighting the good fight ever since. SoCal, I authored a book, The Purity Revolution, about virginity and celibacy. I'm still a virgin, so I really carry a mantle, purity for this generation, to raise up a standard of the importance of waiting until you get married to have sex. So, not married, haven't had sex yet. Maybe I might be married one day.
Looking for a wife?
No, not
so,
looking.
I mean, you got a lot of people watching today, so who knows?
You know.
Who knows? And then over here, I have my friend Contessa. Contessa, I've literally met her in the streets fighting for freedom over this last 2 years. Contessa, take 10 seconds to tell them about you.
That's funny you said literally, because I said I don't usually engage in the hand-to-hand combat. So you said literally met her fighting. You didn't literally meet me fighting, because I don't engage in the hand-to-hand. I do the spiritual warfare part, but. Good afternoon. I have been running with this political scene for a little while now. I was pastoring at a church in the San Fernando Valley. Loved it. It was the joy of my life. It was also the difficulty of my life, because we all know how hard it is to pastor and, shepherd a flock. But the joy of my life to just be running with God's calling on my life. And the Lord started to awaken me to the political aspect of life. And so little by little, he kind of started shifting my gears, and I ended up having to leave the church that I was pastoring at, and I think we'll get into one of those, into that topic a little bit later about why. But you know what, my pastoring just followed me into the political realm, and it's been a huge blessing to be able to minister and be politically aware and organizing at the same time.
That's awesome. Tim, what is it? I think we all have our own story. Like for me, what got me involved, originally I kind of got involved in politics. And I wouldn't say politics, I would say government, because I truly believe the political spirit is kind of the ugly twin sister of the religious spirit that can be in the church. But what got me involved in government was the pro-life movement. When I really started diving into being a pro-life advocate, that pulled me into politics, because it goes hand in hand. That's 15 years ago that I started to get involved. And then, of course, 2020, the lockdowns, the churches shutting down, that really pulled me into a whole new level, to where now I'm actually running for the United States Congress. But what got you involved in the political fight?
Well, I have to go back a little bit to actually my grandmother, who was a conservative, and it was around the time that Reagan was president. I don't want to date myself, but I actually was in high school when Reagan was president, so I was a big fan of Reagan. But at the time, I was a part of a denomination a big denomination, that they were very liberal. So it was very hard for me to accept their excuses for being liberal and being on the Democratic side. I always felt in my blood that the conservatism perspective was the way to go, especially as a Christian, as you mentioned. Some of the issues that are critical to us, pro-life, life in the womb and the sacredness of that is like a deal breaker, you know. So I always leaned to the right, but at times I just kind of didn't vocalize that. And then I realized at a certain point when we were doing
You think that was out of like peer pressure kind of from the surroundings?
Absolutely, it was the pressure. And so you don't want to be accused of being certain things because you lean to the right. So there's a certain stereotype that went with that. But around the time that we did the rallies in Beverly Hills, and they were pro-Trump rallies, the Lord said it's time for you to just come out of the closet as to where you stand politically, because political ideologies are linked to spiritual ideologies, and political ideologies are linked to religion. Just depends on which religion, which God you worship. And so I realized that it was time to take a stand, and that it was disrespectful to our Christian heritage and our American heritage to be afraid to be public about what you believe.
Oh, I truly believe that. And what's interesting is, and I think we all here agree with this, we're not talking Republican versus Democrat. We're talking about conservative values versus liberal values. Correct. And sometimes people, they marry liberal and social justice issues together. And so, but I truly believe as a Christian, you should always value social justice. You know, if there's people that are not being treated properly, it should bother us. So I think that that's something that the liberal movement has tried to steal from being a true conservative, right? You know, but I think it's how we approach those issues, whereas conservatives want to have an answer on how to solve things. Many times the liberal point of view wants to just continue to kind of provide programs and different things that keep people enslaved to poverty and different things like that. But I think it's interesting what you said, you know, sometimes you feel peer pressured into staying that way. What about you, Contessa? What brought you into the fight?
Well, going back years ago, I'm so thankful that like this didn't happen back when I was in college, because I think that if this would have happened back then, I would have totally been BLM.
I hear this all the time.
Yeah,
I hear people all the time like, look, I'd be Antifa.
The way that the way that I thought back then, you know, I even like campaigned for Obama as a Christian, but you know, I just didn't really know, you know, back then I didn't know a lot about looking at, you know, what we all say, like, oh, as Latinos, right, especially, we're like, oh, we're Democrat, but we never think about what that means and what that stands for. So that was me. I just, oh, you're Democrat, and like, yes, the change and everything Obama was talking about, you know, you kind of buy into the whole, like, everybody's oppressed kind of mentality. And so that, I was very young back then. But as I grew in my faith, you know, and started becoming more mature in my faith, that's when my ideals and my values started becoming more clearly defined, and I became more aware of these things. And so I started realizing, wow, like I don't align with these values. I started learning what the values of each, you know, side was, and I thought that I don't align with those values at all. And so as I began to mature, my eyes were open to the agenda that, the things that were being pushed through the Democratic Party, that Obama started to push, the narratives, you know, the whole LGBTQ agenda that just like came to rise during his administration, and the whole abortion situation, and then followed with Hillary and things that she would say. And I'll never forget when she said, there's a couple things that like just stuck out, and she was speaking to Christians saying, we have to change our mentality about certain subjects. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, there's no way. And then, you know, one time Obama about talking about abortion said, I would never want my daughter to have to live with a mistake. And I thought, wow, like that baby's not a mistake.
Well, that's exactly what many people, so the thing about Obama was he was so slick. He's so very well spoken, to where he would slide things in, and over time, when you keep repeating things, it becomes fact to you, right? You know, so that's why I truly believe Obama took us back many years on civil rights issues and different things, but, especially also with pro-life stuff,
Yeah.
And by the way, I really wanted Obama to do well. I didn't vote for Obama. I wouldn't have voted for Obama because I was already a conservative, but I did feel like it was time to have a black president. I thought that was important. He just wouldn't have been the one I would have voted for,
Yeah.
But when he got elected, I believe that we pray for our leaders, and I really wanted him to do a good job. He just didn't.
Right.
He just didn't. He actually, what we see today in our nation is a direct action from what those Obama years did. We're seeing that landslide of things happen still, and it's just made it worse, and it's caused a massive division in our country.
Yeah.
So Tim, we're all pastors here, so we both, or we all of us come out of this, faith background. And what's interesting to me is that many people of faith, so 46% of Christians are registered to vote. And that blew my mind when I found that number.
Here in California.
No, nationwide.
Nationwide.
Nationwide. Only 46% of Christians are registered to vote. And then only half of that number actually do vote. So you're looking at, roughly 25%-ish of Christians across the nation actually make it to the polls. Now, it's been kind of said that it's the separation of church and state. People buy into that. Do you want to speak on that? Give us a minute and a half on that.
I'm going to try to condense in a minute.
Yeah.
This is a subject I'm very passionate about. So we talked about kind of a little bit about conservatism versus liberalism. And really what it boils down to is a biblical worldview
Right.
versus a secular humanism worldview. You mentioned Obama. Well, Obama gave a speech and says that he couldn't use the Bible as a basis to govern.
Right.
And so that's where we as Christians believe, although America is a nation that is founded on Christian principles, it doesn't mean that everybody within the nation is a Christian, and it also doesn't mean that a Christian worldview would make it bad for people of other faiths.
Right.
It is the most peaceful worldview and the most loving and accepting and tolerant of others. So, we got to really get away from the political party and then also the style and the substance debate. Obama was slick and he was a good salesman, but what was he selling? What is the substance of the thing? And that's where the church has to really get rooted in the faith. The myth of separation of church and state has been pushed by the secular worldview people. And the idea that the state must be protected from the church is a myth. The state separation was not about protecting the state from the church.
Right.
It was about not having a state-owned or a state-run church as they did in England with the Queen of England still presiding over the Church of England, that the church was to be autonomous in America, but yet we still would have a big influence on our government, as the church had a huge influence in the founding of America, in the abolition of slavery, just throughout history, the Civil War, even the Civil Rights Movement came out of the church. So the church has always been very influential, and it is the secular humanists that want to neutralize the influence of the church, and we as a church, we can't allow it.
Yeah, that's so good. Now, Contessa, what would you say to people that are, in a church where they're being told not to be involved in government or politics in any way? What would be your advice to somebody like that?
I think that I probably would start with being very understanding of how that exact topic gets split between the compassionate Jesus and the be respectful and the Romans 13, listen to your government and all of that, versus, really taking a hard stand look at, the other parts of the Bible where leaders that are, like people that became leaders in the faith did stand up against governmental tyranny, right? Because there's such this there's such this mentality that Christians are always supposed to be soft and sweet and peaceful, and we don't make waves, and we don't do anything mean, and we don't offend, and that's absolutely not true. And so I probably would say, if you are feeling something that's not right, you have to speak to other people about it and get wisdom from many. But I would probably say their gut is correct, because to not be involved in tyrannical behavior is not what God is for. God is not for us pacifying evil. God is not for us bowing down or being nice to evil. We do not compromise on our godly values. And so if you are getting the inclination that your godly values are being infringed upon, that is because God is rising up that duty in you to do something about it.
That's right. That's good. That's good. That's really good. Now, Tim, as a church leader, we've seen this a lot. What do you, I mean, I know what my opinion is. My opinion is not a popular opinion. You know, I say shut it down. But, you know, what about church leaders that have become sold out to woke culture? You know, all the way from, you know, the LGBTQ, RS, whatever the letters are today. I call it the alphabet mafia. To simple things like, hey, don't come to church if you're sick. You know, we don't want to pray for you. Yeah. You know, taking your temperature out the door. Where's the faith in that? You know, but I mean, I know this is a big one for you, but 60 seconds.
Well, I would say that if you're in a church that's gone woke, the wokeism is a religion.
It is. It's an idol.
It's an idol. And so if your church has gone woke, my advice to you, and this may not be popular, is find the nearest exit and run. And the reason for that, and as Contessa put it so eloquently, we cannot lose our identity as the church. We've got to look back at the motto, the book of Acts, as Contessa so eloquently explained. We are historic for rising up against tyranny. And when the church was passive in Germany, over 6 million people were, you know, annihilated. A genocide took place. And so we've got to break this passive mode that we're the nicey nice and realize that evil needs to be confronted. And one eloquent theologian said, evil only prospers when good men do nothing. And so if you're in a woke church and if they're taking your temperature at the door, then you got to run for the exit. And there are, and I just want to say this, there are so many true apostles. There's so many true prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers. Derrick Gates being one of them, Contessa being here, myself being one. We really love God's people. We're not in for the, you know, for the fame, for the fortune. We're in it because we love God's people. We want to equip, perfect, and develop God's people so they can stand up boldly and courageously as warriors, and we can really win the war for the culture, really win the war for the nations of the world. And if you're not in a church like that, find one, because there probably is one. It may not be the biggest one, may not be the one that's best in production and the theatrical aspects of church, but find a real apostle. Find a real shepherd that will lay down his life for the sheep. And if you don't know of any, I know of quite a few.
Right. Absolutely. That's good.
I just
That's
wanted to piggyback really quick and share like a very practical, real story that kind of, if you're not kind of sure and you said, well, if you're involved in a church that does that, you know, sometimes we hear what the church tells us to do and we don't do it. But, you know, I had a really impacting situation that happened with me as a pastor, that when I looked back at that situation, or when I was actually in the action of it, it really defined what I needed to do and what kind of church, you know, what the mentality of the church I was in. And this was when we had to register people, like you can only have 45 people in because, you know, the seating and all of that kind of stuff. And if you didn't register, and so by the leadership in my church, I mean, they were all about like following it to the T, and they were most concerned about liability more than anything else. And my real life example that really put things into perspective for me was when, so it's being drilled in me, be strict on all these rules, the temperature and the seating. And somebody came, and this was like an individual who I knew was struggling and having a hard time. And, you know, me being a pastor too, like I kind of, I can't always tell in the moment, like the right thing to do. I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to listen to my leadership and, you know, all that. And so he comes and he hadn't registered. And so basically I turned him away. He said, can I still get a seat? I'm here. And I chose wrong because of what had been, it was so strongly in our meetings talked about, you know, like adhering to those things. And so in that moment, I really did say, listen, just hold tight. I'm sure I'll be able to get you a seat, but like, you know, I can't like immediately right now. And I felt horrible when I looked at that. I said, wow, what church turns a person away? And when that's what the ideals that your church is doing would come down to,
Right.
then you know it's wrong. If I have a temperature, how many times have we been with a temperature at a church? You think if I have a temperature and somebody needs to be in church, I'm going to say, you can't be here, you must leave the church. And when you think about it, like down to the real root of what is happening in that moment, you know you're at the wrong place.
Oh, yeah, for sure. You know, we're supposed to be praying for the sick. We're supposed to be laying hands on the sick. You know, I mean, what would the early church say about us turning people away? You know, we're supposed to be laying hands on lepers. You know, leprosy, the one that, you know, most
Way more
contagious
than
things.
COVID,
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just absolutely mind-blowing that this is where people, they got, you know. And, you know, I'd said for a long time, through 2020, I was appalled by the situation because many leaders that I saw shut their churches down, I'd shared stages with these people, thousands of people, and they'd get up there and they'd proclaim, we'll never shut our church down, we'll never do this, we'll never do that, you know, to other things. And then as soon as the government came along and told them what to do, they followed suit. And I was embarrassed. I was literally embarrassed to be an American pastor because of that. But, you know, the Lord told me through that time that, you know, it was okay because God was going to use it to weed out those that really weren't operating in the real power and authority of God. Not to say that those people aren't anointed or never had been anointed, but that they had let a spirit of fear and control and wokeism become an idol in their life. And God is shutting those places down. And I truly believe out of this movement, you will see in the church, you're going to see those no-name people that are going to rise up to the forefront that really have the right heart, the right attitude, the right direction. They're in it for the right reasons. Those are going to be the people that rise. And, you know, my friend Tony Pellegrino, an amazing patriot, an amazing worship leader, just an amazing man of God. He had an encounter with God where God had told him when the Patriot, and this is years ago, this is like 10 years ago, when the Patriot movement merges with the prophetic movement, that's when the billion soul harvest is going to happen. And we're seeing that happen in front of our eyes, right? So we've been doing through 2020, 2021. I can't believe it's been going into year 3 of this. It's bizarre. But, you know, we've been doing these rallies, right? You know, these massive rallies. And, you know, last year, nobody would have thought that there was any conservative people in LA. But we had how many thousands? You know, a couple times, 5,000 plus people meeting at City Hall in LA, you know? And it was all focused on Jesus, though. That was the thing, and it blew people away. You know, we took Jewish people that came out, baptized them in the ocean. You know, Tessa, I think you were at one of those, maybe.
Yeah, I went to that.
Yeah, and
joy.
you know, people were getting rocked by God, and I think that was a down payment from God on what's to come. So, in closing, you know, 30 minutes goes so fast, doesn't it? Give me 60 seconds, Tim, on what God is saying to you. Of where we're moving into now.
Well, I believe what God is saying is the church is moving into an army mode, a warrior mode.
Come on.
Not as just the passive Christians that come in, warm a seat. I was talking earlier how I get people say, I go to so-and-so's church, you know, because it's a big church and it's named like I'm impressed. I'm not impressed that you occupy a seat. You know, it is time for every believer to realize that they're necessary, that they have a ministry, they have a calling, they have a gift, and it's time for people to focus less on buildings and focus on the people in the building.
Come on, yeah.
The building is not a church if there's no people in it, and the church can arise and emerge anywhere. It can emerge in a warehouse, in somebody's home, at a beach, at a rally. I mean, it's time for us to leave the building and not go to church, but actually be the church and function the way the original church model functioned. Yeah. You know, especially ministry gifts. Apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers. I asked Christians in church for years, what is an apostle? And they don't even know. So we need to know how the church is supposed to function, how the gifts, and men having less control and more yielded to the Holy Spirit, and let him do what he does way better than any of us.
Yeah, I think part of, you know, we talk about the 7 mountain mandate, and I truly do believe in the 7 mountain mandate, not necessarily in the exact way people preach it, but I believe that we are supposed to be the influencers of those influential mountains. You know, we are supposed to influence government. We are supposed to influence Hollywood. We are supposed to influence media and so on. But I believe part of that being successful is restoring the fivefold ministry in the way it's supposed to be.
100%.
You know, we have to get back to the early church model
Yep.
of what church is, what the fivefold offices are,
Yes.
and let the fivefold offices be what they are. And also slitting the throat of comparison and competition.
Yes.
You know, one of the things that has crucified the movement of God in our country is comparison and competition.
Yeah.
So everybody wants to be like this church. Everybody wants to be like that minister. Everybody, and so all of a sudden you have every worship pastor is wearing skinny jeans and you know, dressed in the same way, and you know, a comb over emo haircut, whatever it is. You know, not yours. But you know, every church has the same exact worship. So instead of having their ear turned to heaven to hear what God is saying about worship and releasing a new sound, what we do is we turn our ear towards Christian radio or the popular church, and we release their sound. And I think, so there's a difference between revelation and regurgitation.
Yes.
And we want revelation, not something somebody else is doing.
Authenticity.
So guys, I thank you so much. 30 minutes goes so fast. I know you guys have so much more to share. Listen, on my website, you can see it on the screen. It is derrickgates.com. That's my ministry website. You'll be able to have links to podcasts. There's longer form venues in there, our podcasts and different things. Tim and I actually have some podcasts together. You can get longer things with more revelation. I thank you for tuning in. Listen, next week, same time, we're going to have Jesse from Lexit. He's the founder of Lexit. If you don't know what Lexit is, it's the exit from the Democrat Party by the Hispanics, by the Latinos. You guys like Latino or Hispanics? I never know. My wife's both. I call her both, right? Yeah. But he's an amazing guy. He's got an amazing story. God brought him out of a gang life, and it redirected his thinking on what it means to be in the governmental mountain. So we love you guys. We thank you for tuning in. And, man, God bless you guys.
Yay. Well, there goes number one.